How are we doing, Kansas Jayhawks fans? This is your host, Nick Rondeau, here bringing you some Jayhawks Daily content. And we have some big news, I would say. And, we're going to cover it all. We're going to cover, a little bit of what's going on next year, what's going on this year. But, what we love to hear, and that's from our coach, Bill Self, who sat down with the media for a long time, honestly. A lot to unpack with what he said. A lot of big updates on himself, on the team. I don't think I would have nearly enough time to cover it in this episode, so we'll bring it up again in the coming episodes. But first, we got to start off with himself. With Coach Self, and kind of how he's doing. If we all remember, kind of spoke about it before, but back in July, he had 2 stents put in his heart. Spent 2 to 3 days in the hospital. They're never good news to hear. Bill, everyone knows he's had a couple of incidents with his heart, but he said he's feeling great. And, yes, people will throw out retirement rumors. Tony Bennett stepping down right before the season. Bruce Pearl, even, a couple weeks ago. Yes, Bruce Pearl retired for Auburn. A lot of people think those, the older coaches, given the new NIL, given the new transfer portal, they just don't want to hack it anymore. And not that they can't, but they just don't want to. And Bill Self kind of put those rumors to bed. He said he feels great. He said, he's completely changed his diet. He's completely kind of changed everything about his life. But the only thing he hasn't changed, he says, is his coaching, he thinks. He says, I think one of the most telling kind of quotes for him is, he said he doesn't feel, remarkably different just at the surface level as he did, last year. He said, although he did say he didn't feel like he ever felt bad last year. The problem is you don't really know how good you feel until you felt good. You know how bad you were once you're feeling good. So, moral of the story, Bill Self's doing well. He's really excited about the staff additions. I'll kind of speak strictly about the coaching on this kind of update. But he is so pumped that he got Tony. He just said, Tony knows everybody. That Tony knows everybody in this business. Not only, he's been through it all, adversity, highs, lows. So this is kind of, a great addition to get. The fact that they were even able to get him. But, he just loves going out there. He was one of the people that met up with someone I spoke about earlier in the week, Will Conroy. He just knows everybody. He's always going to be around. He's always going to be recruiting, always going to be putting in good work. And I think Bill Self's very excited about that. And he was also very surprised we were able to get Jacques Vaughn, an NBA guy, a guy who's been a head coach in the NBA twice, for about 3-4 years. Obviously that doesn't mean he had a big tenure, but a lot of times that's the players you're working with the team. Those Nets and Magic's team were, to say the least. They were, but we've got a lot to be happy about, and kind of just. I think Bill Self, and there was one other kind of update that we had to bring up, and that was the promotion of Jeremy Case. And so recently, if you guys didn't see, Jeremy Case, a longtime assistant coach, has been promoted to associate head coach, or essentially associate assistant. He's just going to be, a little bit higher up there. And Bill literally said this was going to happen in the spring of last year, but kind of given how everything was going with the other coaches and all those coaching changes. He just said they kind of wanted to push it for the announcement-wise. But he said there's literally no change in his job. The only thing is he's going to have a lot more responsibility, running meetings for all the assistant coaches, kind of gathering all the data. And the only other thing that he kind of really, put to bed was this is not a coach in waiting. He said Jeremy Case is going to be a great coach someday. He will be. He's going to be a great head coach. And then that kind of led to the question of, is this a coach in waiting? Is this something you're... No, he could be a head coach here, but I have no plans of stepping down at Kansas Basketball. This is about making Kansas Basketball great right now, not just great for the future. So I think Bill Self kind of put all those, potential rumors to bed, but... That was, you've got to, when something like that comes out of the news cycle with, a coaching hire that you think is going to be great for his further progression, you have to ask that question. But Bill Self put it to bed, so we are doing fine. We're happy with Bill Self as the head coach, and I love the coaching hires we've got. We're looking ahead, and Bill was looking ahead, and I mean, honestly, like I said, I can't dive into everything he said. This is going to be, far too much information. But one of the big things he said was how this team. He said he didn't want to like really compare it to last year's team, but it's hard not to. That's just kind of the nature of the game. And he said this team is just more athletic and it's deeper, and that's what I think we've been really lacking from Kansas basketball for years. I spoke on Mitch Lightfoot the other day, and he was genuinely a solid contributor for that national championship team. He was a good, 12 minutes off the bench, and it was a spark every time. We need that. He was not the first guy off the bench. He was like the fourth guy off the bench. You need that. And that's the thing is what he really likes is how deep this team is. Yes, we've got Darren Peterson. Yes, that Darren Peterson is, I'm just saying quotes and I'm saying, some paraphrase, but an 18-year-old plays like a 25-year-old. Everything's in slow motion for him. Usually it's so fast, high processing. Where are the cuts? Everything's just in slow motion to the guy because he just sees the game at a different level. And they're very, there are a few people every couple of years that come through the game that kind of have that, mentality that, they kind of what it seemed like Trae Young was at Oklahoma. He just kind of saw everything a lot differently, scoring-wise and passing. But, I'm definitely very excited. There were just some great, kind of updates. He was saying, the exhibition game, everyone should be, available. The only person who kind of had, any lingering issue right now would be Jaden Dawson. I guess he's had a sore knee for the past couple weeks. He's been on and off. But the two biggest exciting things I always have to say is Elmarko Jackson. Bill is so I think what Bill kind of did is he may have solidified the starting lineup. And I didn't want to say it for sure, but he said it's going to be very hard for Melvin Council to leave the starting floor. It's going to be very difficult. He's playing himself into a very key role, so you have to reward that. Obviously, Darren Peterson's going to be starting. We all know that. Flory Badunga, he's another obvious one. And he said he's really excited for Trey White. He said Trey White is exactly the person to play off of Flory, the perfect stretch four. The perfect stretch four that can really establish himself as a scoring threat, a rebounding threat, but also kind of someone that can change the pace. So that Trey White's kind of got that one. I think his comments on Elmarko really make it seem like Elmarko will be back in that 3 spot for us. He said he's 100%, the fact that he was super patient from the rehab, kind of like how Brandon Rush did it back in the day. He looks great athletically. He he's just so proud of him, how he handled that, patellar tendon is a terrible injury to have. It can honestly completely derail your career and, probably life, I would say, beyond that. But that's the thing is he said he's so proud of Elmarko, how he's taken it. And he says he doesn't think he's even lost remotely a step. And that's another year in Bill Self's system, He did say the red shirts, they don't know as of anything right now. Red shirts will be, discussed. But for basketball, it's right after the exhibition game. They're right before the start of the season. That's when they're going to know who they're going to have to redshirt or who might. I have no news on anything like that could be that. I'm assuming maybe a Wilder Evers or maybe Justin Cross. Who knows? But there might be a couple. But no real updates on that from Bill Self because we're doing a lot healthier. We're doing a lot better. There was so much to unpack in this. I just loved what he spoke about, how he spoke about Darren Peterson. He loved how he spoke about Melvin and Elmarko. And I think the biggest quote that people really drew to was between those three, Elmarko, Darren Peterson, Melvin Council, the way they're going to share those 80 minutes. 40 minutes. But technically 80. But yeah, I just think it was speaking more into the fact that those guys are going to be hard to get off the floor because they play themselves into a key role for the offense, for the defense. He was saying how great a Melvin Council's defense is, how intuitive, how he knows exactly, what he should be doing on the floor at all times. And, these are all great things you love to hear from your head coach. And he just kind of said, and the last thing I'll kind of speak on about just this team generally from Bill Self's comments is, he just said they're excited. He didn't think that the team really believed they were the number one team going into last year. He believed that. He thought even that was kind of fraudulent. And he said 19 this year. He said, we don't feel underrated. We don't feel overrated. We just feel hungry. We just feel like we've got something to prove out there. And I know everyone, especially Darren Peterson's, got something to prove. And I think Flory's going to be excellent. He spoke on Flory's development, on Paul's development, on Cole's development. We'll speak on that in another episode. But we kind of got to get into a little bit of next year, which is Tyron Stokes. And do I have the biggest update? Do I have the update that says he signs with KU? I do not. Because he hasn't updated us yet. He hasn't. All I've seen is a couple extra comments, a couple of Talon Kinney interview questions. Nothing that is declaring Tyron Stokes as a Kentucky Wildcat, as an Oregon Duck, as a USC Trojan, nor as a Kansas Jayhawk. So it's very difficult to, we're all waiting for this. And I think there are a lot of dominoes to fall with Tyron Stokes. Yes, Nike over Adidas was a huge domino to fall. But it doesn't make it impossible. You can have a specific jersey, I believe, that that does not prohibit you from, breaking your NIL contract. I believe someone said that in the comments. I've tried to look it up, and I don't see anything that really says you cannot be wearing, a competitor's jersey if it goes through the school. So I wouldn't rule us out just based on that one. And also, Talon Kinney is still working. He is working overtime to get Tyron Stokes back into the KU locker room. I mean, he's done all of his visits. He's done, all of his officials. He's just awaiting the decision. He really is. And, he's going to take his sweet time because he's the number one player in the nation. So he can have a big, hoopla about it. It's Tyron Stokes. But Talon Kinney said, I'm still going to talk with Tyron. I don't care. I'm going to go for him because apparently they played in middle school together. A picture of them when they were young. Talon Kinney was speaking at the Camp USA Basketball. And just how would you not continue to recruit him? Recently our rivals, two analysts, said that Kansas was picking up momentum to get him. What does momentum really mean? I don't know. I mean, the Tyron Stokes update is that he's still not sure. And I think, honestly, at this point, before the Nike deal, I would have said that would have hurt us. After this Nike deal, I think it has to, maybe he's figuring out schematically, realistically, how is he going to make it work being a Nike athlete for an Adidas school? It would be super easy to just pick Oregon right now, to, pick Kentucky, those two Nike schools. It'd be very easy. So I don't know why he wouldn't just do it tomorrow. I mean, obviously he's got a little bit of time left. There's those commitment periods have not completely closed. Early signing period is not opened. So we've got a little bit of time for that. But Tyron Stokes' update is just that Kansas is not out of it. We're definitely not out of it. So we're excited for that. And the last thing we'll talk about is, obviously, for Late Night in the Fog coming up. I hope everyone in the area gets out to it. A great event, obviously. But a couple of changes and a couple of things that are kind of going to be different this year. And they even, talked to Bill about it. No rapper. Yes, no rapper. No 2 Chainz, no Lil Yachty. None of those guys from the past that have done an excellent job. But another player is going to be missing as well, and not from the team. Bill Self did hint at there was only one official visit this weekend, and I did speak on it last week. I believe that's probably going to be Luke Barnett. I'm assuming that means that Ken Lozier has backed off of his official visit. We kind of saw this coming, with the way our recruiting cycle was going. We were filling up positions. We got Trent Perry at the small forward. We got Davion Adkins at the center. We got Talon Kinney at the point. Akenna just doesn't seem like he again, this is my guess. My guess is that he was the one who backed off. Luke Barnett is still the one planning on attending. But kind of a bigger update, I would say, about Late Night in the Fog, according to Bill Self's comments, is this is not, in the past, this may have been the biggest recruiting event. This may have been, the one to push something over the edge, to show what the KU environment is before the season starts, because a lot of people like to get that commitment out. He said the football team's been kind of buzzing, especially over the past couple of years, but he said, that when the football team's buzzing, you can show them that environment and say, yeah, we're a basketball school, can you imagine, And I've even spoke upon that, that does make sense, but he said, just don't, lose as much hope. This is not as big of a recruiting event as it has been in the past. But, he's definitely super excited. Okay, there's no rapper, that will be fine. Potentially no Kenna Alozie, that's fine, It is disappointing to hear him kind of give that update, see only one guy have recruiting. Who wouldn't want more recruits, more, juice, more kind of excitement for what, KU basketball's got this upcoming season. But he said the scrimmage plan's the same. Doesn't matter what time of the season. It's going to be a similar, kind of fun nature. But, I'm excited. I don't know who else is going to go, who else is going to be excited. Comment that down below. But I hope everyone has a great rest of their week. I hope everyone enjoyed kind of what we spoke about. We'll keep talking about Bill Self and these Jayhawks for the rest of the week. And until we tip off Doug Gottlieb, we're coming for you. We're coming for you, Green Bay. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. Like, comment, subscribe, and rock chalk. Go Jayhawks.